What's up, guys? Alex Cook here of the Visualist Guide, and today we're going to talk about why RAW is better. Let's get it! Alright guys, so it's so important to talk about RAW and shooting RAW. You probably know about it, you've probably heard about it, but let's dive into exactly what RAW is before we talk about why you should be shooting RAW, because I think a lot of you guys know about it, you know it exists, you know it's important, but you don't know exactly what it is or what it's doing as opposed to shooting JPEG. So let's dive into this. So if you take a look at this graphic that I have created for you, you will see that when you're shooting RAW, you're basically sending information through the sensor, bypassing a processor, and going straight to your memory card. So that just simply means that you have all the information that you captured in that image in the best full uncompressed quality that your particular camera can capture that image in. If you're shooting JPEG, that's a totally different story because now you're applying things. So if you shoot on a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, you'll see that you have a bunch of different settings, right? So you are picking things out like your white balance, your the parameters that you're going to be using for the JPEG, you know, what size and compression and whatnot, the color space, you know, if you want to be working in neutral or landscape or portrait mode or black and white mode. Okay, and so what these things are doing is it's having you tell the camera, here's exactly what I want done to this image, the final product, and it does all of that in camera for you. And then it just offloads it back into a compressed final version called a JPEG. This is your final product. Now, you can edit JPEGs, but the problem is that they've already been edited by the camera, so to speak, and you don't have as much room to play with, and you certainly don't have nearly as much bit depth and information stored inside that image to push and pull as you would probably like. Now, if you have a camera that can do that and can shoot RAW, there are tons of reasons why, and going back to this chart that I created, or this visual, you'll see that basically it's just bypassing all of that. So you might shoot on your camera in a way that, yes, I'm saying I want to apply a white balance, yes, I want to apply, you know, a color space like your landscape profile or whatever the profile is you choose. But what it's doing is it's saving it in something called metadata. Okay, metadata is simply non-destructive stored information. It's basically a file that goes along with the image saying, hey, here's everything that the shooter told the camera to capture in this image. Here's how he wanted the white balance. Here's how, you know, they wanted the profile to look. But it's not actually applying it to the image. It's still keeping the image just perfectly uncompressed, unedited. So when you move that file into your editor, then you end up having so much more room to play with, not only in the push and pull of editing, but in case you messed something up where you shot too bright or you shot too dark or you got your white balance completely screwed up and you don't like the way that it looks. These are all things that you can change and fix much easier in post rather than just being screwed over because you accidentally made a mistake and you were shooting JPEG. So we already talked about how, you know, a JPEG will compress your image and you're stuck with it. Essentially, it's called baking. It bakes all those settings that you made in the camera into your image and you can't change them. You can't really change your white balance. You can't change all these different aspects of it after the fact. And that's really unfortunate to do, okay? RAW lets you do all of this uncompressed, non-destructive. You can change all of it after the fact. So some of the benefits to shooting RAW are things like, you know, you get a higher quality, a much higher quality in your image than if you're shooting JPEG. Another thing of importance is the levels of white balance, or I'm sorry, brightness, the levels of brightness that the camera can capture. If you're looking at JPEG, you know, it's very easy to blow out and lose information in your brights, you know, all your highlighted areas if you're shooting outside, or if you're shooting, you know, something like this where you have lights in the background. You know, a JPEG image captures only about 256 levels of brightness, whereas a RAW image captures 4,000 to 16,000 levels of brightness. Guys, that's insane. And as I already touched base on, you can obviously change your white balance. This is a key player because there are so many times, especially if you're shooting something like a wedding, you're shooting them in having a dance party or whatever it is they're doing, anywhere you're doing like concerts, anywhere with crazy lighting that's changing on you constantly, the camera is not really going to know what the correct white balance is. And so it's trying to guess on its own. And you know, when you get your image into your editor later at the end of the day, of course you can go in and try and tweak some things, try and fix some things, but if you're shooting in JPEG, it's still baked in. Even if you change it a little bit, whatever that white balance was, that's it, you're done for the day. Whereas in RAW, you can completely just go in there, click on white balance, and you can decide what you want it to look like. Or you can, if you're working in something like Lightroom, you know, as you see here, you can just simply change a slider. You can change if you want it hot or cold, or if you want a tint to it, and it's all non-destructive. This is super important to how you edit your images in post. I think it's important for you guys to start off knowing that it is so important to eventually work your way up to shooting RAW, because it's just the professional standard. So you'll like it a lot more. You'll really enjoy the way you can edit and save your images. There's so many times I have saved images. You know, like here's an example of a photo that I took at a very fast wedding. Okay, this was a wedding that literally, it was just the ceremony and it lasted for about 10 to 15 minutes. So I had flashes and I had things set up, and you know what? I thought I had it down. I took this shot, the flash didn't pop, okay, it didn't go off, so the shot was underexposed. Now if I had shot this in JPEG, I would have been done, okay? That would have been a throwaway shot. I could not use it. I'd have to just toss it and move on. But because I happened to shoot this in RAW, I was able to completely save this image and actually deliver it to them, and they loved it. So again, this is a perfect example of why you really need to be able to shoot RAW. Maybe not today if it's the very first time you're working with a camera that can do this, or that has all these settings and you're just starting to learn how to shoot in manual mode, but it is something that you really should start to understand and start to shoot in so that you can get a better understanding in the edit side of things. And you know, we've been talking about photo work all along here in this video, but shooting RAW is so important with video too. It's a huge factor of importance when you're shooting professional video work. And for the longest time, very high-end cinematic cameras such as the Arri Alexa and, you know, the Red Epic and Scarlett, they've been doing this for a long time, but you haven't really seen it on the consumer market in terms of video cameras that shoot RAW until now. Now we're really getting into the point where you're able to pick up a camera or rent a camera that shoots RAW video, and it's the same thing. You get way more data, it's non-destructive, you can change your white balance, you can change so many factors after having shot it. So you're probably asking a question, and I think I know what it is. Are there any negatives to shooting RAW? And the answer to that is yes, but not really. Okay, so the negatives would really be things like One, it's a little bit more pricey. So cameras that shoot RAW, you're gonna pay a little bit more for them. But, you know, in the world of photography, I think that's, you know, just about any camera you get nowadays, a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, it should be able to capture RAW. So that, for the most part, is kind of included in your purchase. It's more or less when you're shooting on video cameras and cinematic cameras that you're gonna pay a little bit more money to be able to use a camera that shoots RAW. So price could be a small factor, but one of the biggest and most important factors to keep in mind that it isn't so much of a negative, but you should keep it in mind, is space. Okay, so storage space is super important. We all need it. It's something that you just have to have if you're capturing content, right? If you're shooting on JPEG or MOV, you know, compressed formats, yes, it takes up space, but if you're shooting RAW, it takes up so much more space. So, you know, rather than looking at this as a negative, I would just say look at it as something that you need to factor into your cost. You're going to need to have hard drives, external hard drives, and you know, RAID systems, something that you can store all that information on, because it does take up a lot more space when you're shooting RAW imagery, and that's just something that you should keep in mind. Obviously, you're capturing way more data, so instead of it being, you know, a 3 to 4 megabyte photo, you might have a 30 to 40 plus megabyte photo. So you do have to keep that in mind when you're factoring in, okay, I'm going to be getting, you know, bigger images, and I'm gonna need more space to store all of this information. And last but not least is you need something that can handle this. When I say handle this, I'm talking about just the actual ingesting and editing of the RAW media. So for photography, you know, you want to have something that, you know, you need a good computer and you need a good editor, something that can handle a RAW file, a lot of RAW files, working with them fast, and obviously software. So, you know, when I edit my work, photography, obviously I'm using Lightroom. I still work on Lightroom 5, okay? And I also edit stuff in Photoshop. So these both can handle RAW. They're made to deal with RAW, and those are really the main photo editors that you should be working with, in my opinion, to really get the best opportunity to edit that image the way that you want. So I hope that gave you guys a little bit of an insight into why you'd want to shoot RAW, why it's so important, and you know, it's something that you'll learn over time. You'll play with it. There's a lot more to learn when you're shooting RAW and editing RAW, but overall, like I said, it's the professional standard, and it really is the way to be doing things. So hopefully that helped. If you guys have any questions, drop them below in the comment section. I'd be happy to answer them. And yeah, stay tuned for the next episodes that we're coming out with. We have a giveaway coming up, working with a really cool company here, and they're making this new, like, revolutionary product that they would love for us to do an unboxing and test it out, as well as give a few away. So keep an eye on that. You have to be a subscriber, so please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content you're seeing. And as always, you can follow me on Instagram at Alex Cook Creative. You can follow my Creative Studios Instagram. That's just at SXE Media. And then always feel free to follow along on Facebook as well. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you, and we'll catch you on the next one.